Welcome to the Thorn City Syndicate Spotlight Show. I'm your host, Thorn City Podcast Guy. In this episode, John Schrag, co-founder of Oregon's News Exploration Initiative, The One Project. John is a seasoned journalist and a media expert who will take us through his career, offering insights into the evolving landscape of news media. John will shed light on the role of journalism in society, the impact of digital media on traditional news outlets, and his experiences covering significant events. Whether you're a media professional, an aspiring journalist, or simply a news enthusiast, John's perspective promises valuable lessons and thought-provoking discussions. This is more than just a podcast. It's an opportunity to gain insights, be inspired, and join the conversation today. Thorn City Podcast Guy, let's go. Welcome back to another episode of the Thorn City Syndicate Spotlight Show, where we network and build connections through interviews and discussions. I'm your host, Thorn City Podcast Guy. Make sure you visit www.thorncitysyndicate.com. Be the first to know about new releases, bonus updates, bonus episodes, and exciting updates. This episode is brought to you by GMP Podcast Group. I got another special guest in the house today, Mr. John Schrag.
Yeah.
How we doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
Nice. Thanks for coming, man. Like I mentioned earlier, today we're going to discuss your background as a journalist at the Portland Tribune, the Willamette Weekly, the News Times in Forest Grove, and the Chicago Reporter, where you focused on race and social justice. Then we'll highlight your current role with the Oregon News Exploration Project and your efforts in supporting local journalism that aims to provide high-quality community-first reporting and partnerships to disrupt misinformation and target news gaps across the state.
Yes, sir.
So, tell me a little bit about your background, where you're from, and the pivotal moment that shaped your career.
Yeah, I would say I'm from Illinois. I grew up in what was then rural Illinois, north of Chicago, literally next to a dairy farm, and got a little interested in journalism after we moved to the suburbs, the western suburbs, and there was a journalism program in high school, and I kind of got the bug there. And then got my journalism degree in Southern Illinois. We came back to Chicago. My wife, who was also a journalist, got employed by Associated Press. A pivotal moment for me was I was looking for a job, any job. I was interviewing any job opening. And there was something that came up for this publication called the Chicago Reporter. And it was like not very well known. It was a newsletter that focused on race and poverty. And here I am, a white kid from the suburbs. But I did some investigative reporting in college. And I got hired, which was like getting paid to go to grad school. It was phenomenal, incredibly diverse, talented staff. There were 4 reporters, 1 managing editor. So for me, that was the pivotal moment in my career because not only did I learn investigative reporting, but I also learned what it was like to work in a diverse newsroom, which sadly, that was the last time I've worked in a diverse newsroom. And so that's part of what will, loop us in at the end. What we're trying to do with Oregon News Exploration is that's one of the gaps we know is that newsrooms in Oregon and around the country, but Oregon in particular, are disproportionately white. It affects the news. It affects people's trust. So it's one of the things that we're hoping to address.
Nice. So, how did that experience influence your perspective and set the stage for your commitment to community-first reporting?
Well, yeah, it was interesting because I grew up 40 miles from Chicago as a kid, and we never really went in. And it wasn't because, like my dad went to grad school at the University of Chicago, so Southside. It wasn't like he was afraid. It wasn't like, he was a ordained minister. He worked for social justice. I think it was just we weren't oriented toward the city. And so Chicago to me was this foreign place. And then I moved there. And not only do I move there, I'm working for a newsroom that is sending me to all corners of the city. And it was just an eye-opening experience. And it just made me realize that there are stories to tell. And you got to get out of your comfort zone at times. And also that it's hard to establish that trust, particularly when there are communities who haven't been well treated by the media. We were lucky at the Chicago Reporter. We had a very good reputation. So if we walked into a neighborhood meeting usually there was someone there like, these guys are okay. And that was a big, like you talk networking. Who can open doors for you? Sometimes the institution can open the doors. Sometimes the institution closes the doors. So that's one of the things I learned is that, if you just show up and no one knows who you are, people are going to understandably be a little put off. But if someone can say, hey, he's a good guy. And again, I've had plenty of people who've not liked what I've written, but what I always tried to say was, you won't be surprised. No gotcha journalism. So even if you're writing something that is a difficult story and some people may not like it, if you treat them with respect, if they know what's coming, and you always say, and if you see anything there that's wrong or you don't like, please give me a call. And you have to mean it. You have to mean it. And I think there were times when I didn't. And as I got older, I was like, no, people trust. It's a big thing when people put their trust in journalists. And I think a lot of times we don't earn it and we don't keep it. That's not good.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you have any memorable moments or experiences, big stories you did at the Chicago?
Yeah, there was one. We were doing an update on a story that had been done previously about spending in Chicago parks. And we got the budgets for all the parks where the money was being spent. And we found that the pattern that existed 10 years previously was still there, which was money was going disproportionately to parks in white neighborhoods. At the time, Chicago was still very segregated. So you could actually, look at a park and draw a line around it and figure out, this is a white park, this is a black park, this is a Latino park. And the money was going to the white parks. And we had our report showed that. And so I had a meeting with the park district and I went down, took the bus, and I walk in the room to talk to the people from the park district. And it was like a table full of suits. All these people with the suit and tie and the papers. And I think partly it was an intimidation tactic, and it worked because it rattled me. But I also realized, they're scared. And that's good. That's always good. When the people in power are nervous, as a journalist, you're like, this is a good sign.
Yeah, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
You're barking up the right tree, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Chicago Reporter, is that before you worked at Portland Tribune and Willamette Week?
So I came to Oregon, worked for Willamette Week. I was there about 14 years. I had the good fortune to work on probably the most amazing story of my career, which was Nigel Jaquist was investigating Neil Goldschmidt and the allegations of sexual abuse. And just to watch an incredible investigative reporter work, give him some support on the editing and reporting and watch that project come to fruition was amazing. He won a Pulitzer Prize for that, investigative journalism. First time that Alternative Weekly had ever won the Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting. So that was a great highlight. He's still a good friend, incredible journalist. So then I went from Willamette Week to the News Times in Forest Grove, a little small paper in my hometown of Forest Grove, owned by Pamplin Media Group. I was editor and publisher, which meant I was also a reporter. I was also the janitor. When the roof leaked, I was the one who moved the buckets. That goes. So that was a great experience. And I really learned a lot about community journalism because, and I think that was something that I hadn't really done, is like just live and focus on one small community. And so that was really helpful. And then became executive editor, which put me in the offices of the Portland Tribune, worked closely with that staff. And then it was about a year ago, we applied for a grant with American Journalism Project, some fellow reporters and I, and we got a grant to start Oregon News Exploration. So I left Pamplin Media Group last summer and have been working on this independent project ever since.
Nice. So what's your role with the Oregon News Exploration Project?
Right now, we're not really, because we're in the exploratory stage, we're not really picking up titles. I'm co-founder. Lee Vandervoo, incredibly talented investigative reporter. She's a co-founder. And then Emily Harris, longtime broadcast journalist. She's the third co-founder. And then rounding out our team is we have a consultant, Mike Green, who you guys might know. He's been super helpful, fantastic journalist. And he's been real helpful in some coaching and some guidance.
Nice.
So yeah, that's we're right now. We're just trying to finish up our research and figure the next steps forward.
Nice. So when did this start? the project?
Started officially in July, August, and then we started doing our research last fall. I spent a lot of time in the Columbia River Gorge, did some intense research talking to people there. We did a small project. Emily Harris, who I mentioned, one of our co-founders, she's fluent in Russian and is very knowledgeable about the Russian-Ukrainian communities in the Portland area. And so she did some reporting and interviews there, kind of like we did. And then the third emphasis we have is on the Black communities around the greater Portland area. And you've been helpful with that, which is greatly appreciated. So what we're trying to do is figure out for all these groups, where do they get their local news? What do they think is missing? And then figure out how we as a new nonprofit can help. And our model is we really want to, we're not coming in and saying, oh, we're going to be the number one news source for Black Portlanders. That's just ridiculous. But what we can do is we can find out who is out there giving good information that Black residents of the Portland area are interested in, or Russian, Ukrainian-speaking residents are interested in, or residents of the Gorge are interested in. And then who's doing that work, and how can we support it? And how can we make sure that there's a good local source of factual information out there for everybody?
Nice. Yeah. Times changed in the media world. And so podcasting, I think, is something that should start getting involved in, putting out news shows and more stuff for the local community to get their information on where they, what's going on, because it's hard to get the right information. So yeah, we're going to take a break here, get a message from our sponsor, GMP Podcast Group, the production team. When we come back, we'll talk more about the Oregon News Exploration Project and its mission in providing high quality community first reporting. Discover GMP Podcast Group Studios, located at 2406 East Burnside Street in Portland, Oregon, offering a range of podcasting packages to suit your needs, starting at just $49 per hour for your basic setup, featuring a Rodecaster Pro audio console and SM7B microphones, as well as options complete with camera operator and audio engineer expertise. Elevate your podcasting with multi-camera recording, plus we capture behind-the-scenes shots within the studio. Visit us at www.gmpodcastgroup.com and let GMP Podcast Studios be where your podcasting journey begins.
Cause this syndicate lyricist exists. Don't blink one eye, baby, you just might miss history in the making from the making of this. Third, I guess it's welcome back to these words. So I'ma come well like welcome back words for sure.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Back to the Thorn City Syndicate Spotlight Show. I'm your host, Thorn City Podcast Guy. Got my guy, John Schrag.
You got it. Nailed it.
Did I say it right?
You did.
Nice. But yeah, man, so it's the Spotlight Show. It's all about the power of networking and forming strategic alliances. And so I think that's kind of what happened here.
Yeah.
Through other people, networking circles, we connected. And now it's about finding how can we form a partnership and help each other. I think we already, with the surveys, we've already been helping out. So glad we could help. And just excited to see what the next steps are and see how we can pull it all together. I started this to help out my friend. Like I said, if anyone's listening and they want to hear the whole story, go back to episode 1. He was my first guest. He's how I got into management. Thorn City Syndicate's a management company, and I wanted to help him out. He did music as we were younger, in our younger adult ages. He eventually got caught up in the fast life and hooked on pills and alcohol, and so he reached out. And so I wanted to help my friend out. And I selfishly wanted some music of his because I think he's better than everybody. So I decided to get him back in the studio, record some songs. We traveled, did some shows. I needed a music video, and someone introduced me to my partner, my business partner back there, Justin, Gaddis Motion Productions, and which started the GMP Podcast Group. and we did a music video called Honesty, and we entered some film festivals. We won some awards. We traveled to some film festivals, and then COVID hit, and all the music stuff stopped. And so he was friends and roommates with a guy by the name of Tim James, who's a health coach and sells health supplements. His business wasn't doing so good, so they decided to start him a podcast called The Health Hero Show. Health Hero Show with Tim James. He's currently rebranding to be the Tim James Unleashed Show, but Tim James has been at it for a while now. We released his 204th episode this week.
Wow.
So shout out to Tim over there killing it. We need to find more Tim James on our roster of podcasters, and we'll be doing well. But yeah, man, tell me more about the mission of the Oregon News Exploration Project.
Well, I think what it is sort of what you've been talking about, which is networking, who you know. There's a lot of states where someone has an idea for a nonprofit news outfit, and they raise some money and they jump in and they kind of disrupt the local news ecosystem, and we really don't want to do that. So what we're trying to find out is how do we broaden our networks? So I reach out to Mike reaches out to you, you reach out to me, suddenly a connection is made. And I trust Mike, you trust Mike, so it's like, okay, we can work together.
Yeah.
But that's how it's done, and I think too often there were a lot of people shut out by that. And one of the things we really do want to figure out is how to generate a pipeline for storytellers, journalists of color, because we've done a lot of interviews with journalists, and journalists of color are generally, the stories they tell about working in Oregon are not great, and it's not necessarily overtly hostile. It's just they just say it's weird.
Yes, this is what it is.
Walking into a newsroom and being the fill in the blank, the Latino reporter, the Asian reporter, the Black reporter. So we're trying to figure out how can we create environments where communities of color can have people speak not for them, but people who they trust, people who they connect to, people who can tell their stories. And that's where, Mike Green has been really helpful and it's got a lot of ideas. So our idea is to use our connections, use our network to explore, and that's what we're wrapping up now. The research is being wrapped up. So now we're like, okay, now we know where the gaps are. And in rural Oregon, it's really quantity. There just is not enough news for rural Oregonians. There's too few reporters to cover community events, public meetings, etc. So it's a capacity issue. That's what we found in the Gorge, with one exception. We did a focus group in Spanish, so Spanish speakers. A lot of people don't realize how quickly the Latino population is growing in the Gorge. Hood River County is about 30% Latino. The neighboring county, Wasco County, over the past 20 years, the white population has actually decreased while the Latino population has grown. So it's an important community out there. And they were saying that they just were not able to get basic information, including news, in their own language. And so for that's an issue of, okay, then the format's wrong. And to your point, they're also like, they're not, they don't gravitate toward print. They don't necessarily gravitate toward websites. They like audio. They like radio. I think podcasting is a really interesting way to reach the Spanish-speaking audience because they're already attuned to that kind of delivery system.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to do for rural Oregonians. That's what we want to do for communities of color. Again, right now we're surveying Black residents of the greater Portland area about where they get their news, what they would like to see in their news stream, what experiences, good and bad, they've had with legacy media, and then also, what alternative sources of information do they use? And this podcast has come up.
Nice.
Shouldn't surprise you, but people are aware and they listen. And so, if we can, so before we do anything, we have to gather the information. And that's what we're wrapping up now. And then we'll look based on the information. Here's what might work, continue the conversation. It's going to be a lot of talking, and for us, a lot of listening. And then depending on what we hear, what's our role?
Gotcha. So can you share your thoughts on the current state of the Oregon information industry and the challenges it faces?
Yeah, I mean, I came from legacy. I started in Chicago. The Chicago Reporter was a nonprofit, which back then was very unusual. So we were supported primarily by grants and some corporate sponsorships, and no one was paying for the news. And then I came to Willamette Week, which is a traditional advertising revenue model, and back then it was print ads, classified ads. That's what paid our bills. Same thing when I switched over to Pamplin Media Group, Forest Grove News Times, very print heavy. All our revenue came from print ads. We did a little on the web. And what's happened is those print ads have dried up because for advertisers, for some advertisers, print still does make sense. I don't think print is going to die because I think it is a really good delivery system, and for some people, it makes sense for them to pay for it. But now it's your phone. That's where most of us get our news.
Yeah.
So it's a big change, and I think legacy news organizations, including Willamette Week, Portland Tribune, Oregonian, they're struggling to figure out how do you come up with a revenue model that works. So you're seeing the paywalls go up. I don't know what the alternative is. I know people don't like paywalls, but if you don't pay for something, people who bring you the news can't continue doing it. So I think I think that's where the nonprofit model can help, and we want to support some of the gaps that are really hard to fill. It's really hard to support rural newsrooms just because there's not enough people out there to support it. It's sometimes hard to provide good news to communities of color because either they're shut out or their population size makes it hard to monetize, or there's language barriers. But I think our goal is to try to find what those barriers are, and then selectively say, here's a way that we're going to jump in and try to break down some of those barriers and bridge those gaps.
Nice. So you mentioned what you've done at the Columbia River Gorge.
Yeah.
Are you done with that down there, and how does that gonna affect what you do out here?
Well, I think what we'll do is we're heading to the gorge next week to go share our findings. So, what we did is we said, please tell us a bunch of information. We had incredible support from the local journalists in the gorge. A big shout out particular to Chelsea Marr and the Columbia Gorge News. So they helped us kind of do what you did in Portland, which is get people to take surveys, connect us with connectors, community connectors, like Mike did in Portland. And so we got the information. Now we're going to go back and share, here's what we found. Here's the gaps that we found. Here's what people want. And again, it's sort of different. The English-speaking population is looking for one thing. The English-speaking population, English-reading population really wants more local news, more local government news, more community events. And the Spanish-speaking population, they just want basic information in their own language, and they want it on the platform that they are most comfortable with, which is airwaves. Right? I mean, they say radio. I think podcast is something we'll definitely be looking at. So that's what we'll do. But we want to then say, these are our ideas. This is your community.
Yeah.
Does it resonate with you? And then if the answer is yes, then the step forward is, okay, how much does it cost? And that's where we will say, we will help. We will help raise money. So, it could be that we have an employee who works for us, is paid for us, working in the gorge, but hopefully very connected to the community, living in that community, not parachuting in and out. Same thing with the Russian Ukrainian speaking community here in Portland. We may end up with an employee who is, from that community, who will be doing reporting for us, and then sharing that information. And then, depending on what we hear from Black Portlanders, we may or may not say we need an employee. It may be that we're just playing a supporting role and a connecting role, a networking role. And that if we do that, that may be enough. So to be determined.
Nice. So looking ahead, what are some of the future aspirations and long-term goals of the Oregon News Exploration Project in fostering an informed, inclusive community?
I think one of the things we're finding is people, everyone, there's so many talented people out there who are trying to tell stories, trying to connect people, do what you guys are doing, do what, I think of the Portland Chinese Times, which is a Chinese language newspaper. There's a bilingual volunteer-run radio station in the Gorge that's barely hanging on. So one of the things would be nice is if there was an institution where people could say, hey, I'm interested in doing a podcast. What are some resources? And we could say, hey, there's this thing called Thorn City Syndicate. If your podcast is in this, it's a sweet spot for you. If you want to work with a Spanish language radio station, well, there's one in the Gorge, there's one in Hermiston, there's probably more that we don't know about. So partly it's to just sort of say, let's make those connections. Because they're so powerful. I think, it was I was talking about the podcast. I was listening to the podcast on the way in with Kai, and I'd never heard that before. Your network is your net worth.
Yep.
That was like, wow, that one stuck with me. And so, I've been very lucky. I've been in journalism in the state for a lot of years. I come from a place of privilege. I've been in a lot of meetings. I know a lot of people. So I've got a great network, and I really want to share that, connect people, and then in a lot of cases get out of the way. Because that's, to me, that's exciting, is to say, you know what? You guys got this from here. We can step back, and that your relationship can take you to the next stage. So that could be from community organizations and journalists, or journalist to journalist.
Nice. Yeah. Like you said, it's all about those, what I call strategic partnerships. So we're going to take one more break here, get a message from our sponsor, the Thorn City Syndicate Management Team. When we come back, we'll wrap it up and finish with some thoughts on the collaborative vision and how we can support the future of Black media in Portland. Introducing Thorn City Syndicate Management, your solution for brand management, social media promotions, digital content distribution, and podcast production. From shaping engaging content that resonates with your audience to amplifying your brand's reach through podcasting. We're your partners in driving success. We offer free strategy sessions and leverage our recording studio and personalized strategies to establish an online presence. Your brand's journey to the top starts with Thorn City Syndicate Management, where innovation meets results. Contact us now at www.thorncitysyndicate.com to embark on the future path of transforming your brand's future.
Exists. Don't blink one eye, baby, you just might miss history in the making from the making of this. Third, I guess it's welcome back to these words, so I'ma come well like welcome back words for sure.
Yes, sir. Still here in the spotlight. John Schrag. Appreciate you coming through, man, and sharing your story and really getting this project going. And it's really, I think it's something missing here, definitely in our community, the local news. Excuse me, I don't know where we get local news personally that pertains to our community. Only stuff I hear on the news about our community is the violence that's going on. You don't hear any of the good stuff. They're not putting people on the news like us, right? Over here, right, at GMP Podcast Group on Burnside. So they need to share more stories like, there's some good people out here doing good things. And so hopefully we can help bring that to fruition. But can you elaborate on the exploration and how it determines the direction and vision of media that empowers the Black communities?
Yeah, I think when I was at Willamette Week, I worked with a colleague, and above his computer on the wall where he could see it when he was on the phone, in large letters he wrote shut up and listen. Because I think journalists, there is a little bit of arrogance that comes with the occupation because you have power, you have access, you control. You and I can talk for 45 minutes and I get to decide what soundbite I pick. And I think it was, sometimes we just have to shut up and listen to understand, not listen for the soundbite. And there's a big difference there. And so to really listen, what is it that the communities want? So until we went to the gorge, I mean, I could have sat down and said, here's what we should do in the gorge. I can see what's going on in the gorge. I'm smart. I'm a journalist. I can figure this out. But until we listened, and we spent weeks and hours and lots of money from American Journalism Project to actually find out what the communities want, and there's different communities in the gorge, we can't respond. So I think the research piece is sometimes missing, and we were so lucky to get this grant that gave us the runway to do this kind of research, to have these conversations, to reach out to people like you and say, hey, we don't have a level of trust and history with the Black community in Portland, but you do. Can you reach out to your networks? Help us gather information. So we get that information. Then we share the information. And then together we come together and say, what is the path forward? So it's not a top-down, we know what's best, we're coming here with a model. It's, we need to listen. And it's hard, it's time-consuming, and it's expensive. And luckily, through the American Journalism Project, we have the time and the resources to do it, because that's what this project's all about. It's listening to the people. What do they want? Because if you don't give people the product that they want, it's not going to work. So,
yeah. Well, the Spotlight Show it's form of local news in a sense. It's part of the reason why I started the show is to highlight local businesses, entrepreneurs, and podcasters, and let people come share their story and let people know they're here and what they got going on. So I guess I'm part of the local news community now, and I didn't think about that. So yeah, let's see. Can you elaborate on the specific initiatives within the project for the unrepresented voices within the Black community, and how are we going to ensure the diverse perspectives are reflected in the media coverage?
Yeah, so like I said, it starts with listening, and that's where we are now. So you and some other people are out helping us collect some survey data. And what we'll do is we'll look at that survey data. And it's really interesting, the preliminary data, where people get news about the Black communities in the area. As I mentioned, your show comes up, Numbers FM comes up, X-Ray FM comes up, obviously the Observer, the Scanner. There's a lot of information, and yet there's nothing to really pull it together. So I think one step is just to say, let's get people in a room and say, here's the need. What are some ways to move forward? We are further ahead in the gorge because we've wrapped up the data. And so as I said, we're going to go back there, say, here's what we found. Here's some ideas we have. Here's how we move forward. So we'll do that with every community we serve. And right now, the ones that are currently we're starting with is the gorge to get a sense of a model that works in rural Oregon, also a Spanish-speaking rural population, Portland area, urban, immigrant group, Ukrainian, Russian speakers. And then the third one, which is we're still in the research stage, is, the Black communities in the greater Portland area. So right now, we don't know what's going to come. And I think that's in part because that's the way it's supposed to be. We got to listen first. Shut up and listen. And then figure out where we go forward.
Nice. So how does the project commit to supporting Black journalists and storytellers and their aspirations of becoming the next generation of Black media entrepreneurs?
Well, that's going to be the conversations. We think we know that dropping journalists of color into white newsrooms is not a model that works very well. At Pamplin Media Group, I tried and I was successful, not as successful as I would like to be to recruit journalists of color. And I think, what we heard in exit interviews is that it's hard. We heard that within Pamplin. I think we've heard that with other people. So we have to find a different environment. And is there a way to find a meeting place? The one thing that's interesting is when there are gatherings of journalists, regardless of whether they're journalists of color or white journalists, there's a hunger for networking. It's just people, they just want to stop. They want to keep talking. They want to go to the bar afterwards. They want to trade stories. They want to trade tips. They want to trade job leads. They want to complain about their bosses. There's a real hunger for that. And I think if we took the definition of journalist and broadened it a little bit to include people like you, include people who are working at the numbers in other places who aren't, quote, journalists, but they're providing local information about the community. So let's forget the label and just say, can we all get together? How do we work together? There is a role for journalists. There's a role for people who are more civic boosters. But until we make those connections and we find a space where they can come together and share knowledge, and we figure out the platforms to deliver what they find, then we're all just stuck in our little silos.
So yeah, it sounds like we need to create our own news team collaboration and get together with some local partners and try and put something together.
Yeah, I think in some cases, networking is definitely a part of it. And I think training, though, is also another one. And I think that's where we can help, identify people who have an interest in community events and just say, hey, whether we call you a journalist or not, here are some skills we can teach you so that you can share accurate information about your community with the people who live in your community at the time and place and platform where they want it. If we could start to do that, that would be a huge success.
Yeah, nice. Well, like I said, man, I appreciate you starting the project, man, the Oregon News Exploration, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And I like the fact it emphasizes collaborative and inclusive media. And I would like I said, I would like to be a part of helping bringing the vision of Portland Black community media. Maybe we can do a station here, right here at GMP Podcast Group.
Who knows, man?
Who knows? But like I said, I appreciate you coming through, sharing your story. Where can people find you, and how does one get involved to support the project, the One Project?
Yeah, so right now, as I said, we're still in the research phase. You can go to our website, OregonExploration.news, and you'll see some updates. There's actually an interesting column written by Mike Green, who was talked about, my co-founder, Lee Vandervoo, about, why do these white people want to know about us? So, which is a fair question. So
yeah, that was a great article. I read it. You guys should go check it out.
Yeah. So that's where you can find out. We are not producing news at the point. We're not hiring. It's kind of frustrating for I've got all these pent up ideas, but I just think of my colleagues, shut up and listen.
Yeah.
So we will start rolling out some ideas this in spring 2024. Have to hit the fundraising hard summer of 2024. But we can't fundraise until we know what we need to raise money for.
We're raising money for.
So it'll be a busy few weeks, but you'll be in the loop, as will the rest of the people who've helped us along the way.
Nice, I appreciate it. So yeah, I like to encourage the listeners to explore their passions, embrace innovation, and pursue entrepreneurship in their own unique ways. Thanks for joining us. Explore the power of networking and find inspiration by following me at Thorn City Podcast Guy for updates, exclusive behind-the-scenes content, and to join the conversation today. Make sure you go to, what's the new site now? fanlist.com/Thorn City Podcast Guy. That's the fan page for me I've created. You can leave messages, voicemails. It's just a way for me to start trying to engage with my audience a little more. So yeah, stay tuned for upcoming episodes of the Thorn City Syndicate Spotlight Show as we continue to highlight individuals, businesses, brands, and podcasters. Don't forget to subscribe to the Thorn City Podcast Guy YouTube channel. Follow at Thorn City Syndicate, the management company, and at GMP Podcast Group, the production company as well. Be sure to drop by www.thorncitysyndicate.com. Schedule your free strategy sessions. I'm your Thorn City Podcast Guy. Holla at your boy. Thanks, man. I appreciate you. Hey, good stuff.
It's great.
Oh, man, that was good.
What man? What power? Hoodoo.
I appreciate y'all tuning in to another episode of the Thorn City Syndicate Spotlight Show, where we network and build connections, interviews, and discussions. Until next time, I'll at your boy, Thorn City Podcast Guy. I'm out.
You remind me of a man